on what level would you say viewing pornography is a betrayal? Would you say it's an adultery? Because I just had a guy ask this like 2 weeks ago. What is your definition of betrayal? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that is such a challenging question. And I think particularly because the one who is struggling and the spouse can have a very different feeling. And so,
yes.
For 10 years, when I'm telling my wife, hey, I stumbled into pornography again. I'm really sorry. It was just one night, and now I've moved on and I got, I'm not keeping anything, not hiding anything. And to me, it felt like, hey, I've had this struggle since I'm a teenage guy. It's just images of the mind and things I'm seeing online. But my wife would tell me, and even in those early years, she'd say, Nick, this feels like adultery. And I'd be like, well, it's so different. There's not real people. I would never do that. But what I missed is if my wife is saying to me, Nick, this feels like adultery, right? There should have been something in my heart that went, I don't ever want to do that to my wife. And if that's how it's like, if she had come to me and said, Nick, when you borrow my car without asking me, it feels like adultery. Like if she had told me that, I would say, man, I will never borrow your car without asking. That I don't ever want to make you feel that way. Oh, yes. And yet in this area, I was rationalizing and trying to explain it away. So I would say there are differences. When there's a physical affair and there are other people that are a part of that equation, it's more complex, it's more messy. But I think statistically, we have found through a lot of research that the impact on the partner can be equivalent, whether it's pornography, real people. Yes, there's different layers and levels to it, but the betrayal can strike just as deep. And part of that too, if you think about it, for a spouse that's in a marriage, if they've hopefully never had their spouse cheat on them with another real person, but their spouse is looking at naked images or watching other people have sex, they don't have anything to compare to, right? It's like, all I know is this hurts. It makes me feel like I'm not good enough. It makes me feel like you'd prefer to be with someone else rather than me. And I would say that's betrayal. So in a sense, I would define betrayal as anything that causes a spouse to feel like we have broken the vow of our marriage to make them our one and only and to forsake all others. We vowed to forsake all others. And I didn't make a stipulation say, well, I forsake all physical others, right? My vow was to forsake all others. And I would assume that means in any form.
Yep.
And so in a sense, there's betrayal there. Now, what is adultery? And you can unpack Matthew 5, and I believe Jesus was calling pornography a form of adultery. But the way I would interpret it, I don't think that means that every time someone has looked at pornography, they're now eligible for divorce because they've committed the kind of adultery that does lead to divorce. So there's nuances there that we could talk about. Should you call it adultery or not? I actually learned in our story and in working with a lot of other couples, I don't really care what you call it. I think the important thing is to underscore if your spouse is saying this leads to feelings of betrayal as equivalent to you cheating on me with another person, then it's betrayal and it's a serious issue that has to be dealt with.
Man, I sure appreciate you unpacking that. One more thing I want you to unpack that you said. So I've met with 2 different guys over the last 35 years of ministry that were sex addicts. And I said, well, so tell me what that means, and actually, and the motive was going, hey, how deep am I going here in my own lust, right? And one guy said, oh, I masturbate 8 times a day, every day. One guy said 7. So I thought, oh my gosh, oh well, man, holy cow. So, but in your story, you're saying your pornography issue was a couple times a year, right?
In some good years, but I'm sure other times it was more like monthly.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just saying. So if a guy's going, well, I'm not 8 or 7 or 8 times a day. I'm just, a couple times a month. But you dove headlong into this program, and your wife felt betrayed. I know how guys, their minds are going, oh, this isn't for me. I'm only a hobbyist. Talk to us about the guy that's going, oh man, I'm not a sex addict. I'm just a hobbyist. Or whatever you want to call yourself.
I mean, a couple of things about that. I mean, obviously, definitions of addiction change, and we could talk about what I mean when I say addiction, because it's not a disease model that would remove us from responsibility. But I bring up the point of how much poison is okay in your life?
Yep.
Is 7 times a day of poison okay? Well, we'd say no. Is once a month poisoning yourself okay? I think we'd say no as well.
Yep.
But let me really answer your question by telling a story from ours, because I was very much in hey, I don't have a real problem. That's for guys that are 7 times a day.
Yeah.
For me, it's occasional.
Yes.
And I'm dealing like last time, I would really convince myself last time was the last time, and I meant it. But it never was.
Yeah.
So in this process, we hear from Dr. Ted Roberts. We're invited to join Pure Desire. I was so skeptical that they offered this first step. They're like, hey, if you're trying to figure out if you need help, go talk to this gentleman in our denomination who was kind of a pastoral counselor type guy, and he'll help you discern if you should go to Pure Desire. So I went and met with this guy, a friend of mine named Morris, and I spent the better part of our meeting trying to tell him why I didn't need the TED program. That's what I called it, the TED program. I'm like, I don't need that much help.
Yeah.
I just need a couple of tools or a couple of tips, and I'm almost free. And he said, okay, Nick, let me ask you 3 questions. He said, number 1, how long has this been a problem? And I'm like, well, since my early teen years. So at that time I was 30. I'm like 15, 16 years at this point. He's like, okay, second question. How many times have you tried to stop? That's where I kind of laughed, because I was like, well, every time was going to be the last time. So honestly, I've tried to stop hundreds, if not thousands of times. He's like, okay, third question. Is it causing you or people you love significant amounts of pain? And that's when it got serious. I'm like, yeah, I think if I relapse again, my wife might leave me.
Whoa.
He said, okay, let's put those 3 together. It's been a problem for a long time. You've tried repeatedly to change without success, even though it's causing you or people you love significant pain. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much my life right now in a nutshell. And that's where he got real serious, and he looked at me and in love, but in truth said, Nick, that's the clinical definition of an addiction.